Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's always an amazing experience to visit your Capitol. It is a truly extraordinarily beautiful building. Thank you, Chairman Metcalf and Chairman Everett, for your leadership on this issue. This is not something that a lot of people, frankly, understand or comprehend for purposes of the fact that we all take for granted, I believe, our right to vote, to have our vote count as cast. And that's why I'm here. The idea has to be that when an individual makes that vote must count, and that vote must be retained and potentially audited the way it was cast. And this has been something of a challenge based on the current technologies. I've spent about 38 years doing national security, about 30 of that relating to cyber and cyber operations. And we live in a time where our lives have become improved by digitization, anything digital. Everything we have now has some level of technology that relates to computers, from coffee makers to aircraft, everything in between. That includes some mistakes, I believe, that were made regarding voting systems made back in the mid-2000s after the Florida debacle and the Bush-Gore race, the hanging Chad issue. There was a race to digitize everything. And by digitizing everything during that period, the threat to the digitization was not fully understood. And because of the way those systems were designed, there were inherent technical flaws which now, after all this time, our adversaries have been able to figure out how to exploit. It is that issue that we must now deal with to make sure that the technology selected to fix one issue is not now creating a second issue, which will create even additional and greater problems in future elections. So that's why this is important. That's why I am gratified to have your leadership addressing this right up front. So I don't want to get into the politics of the Mueller report or the Russia hacks. Suffice it to say, based on my understanding of the situation, everything I've studied, is that the Russians did do everything they could to upend the election. Now, were they taking a side? I don't believe for a minute they were. The whole concept of foreign adversaries is not to actually help select a winner. It's to create the chaos which undermines our confidence in our own system of government. And that happened. And it's continuing to happen, and it'll happen again. Everything now falls to us to mitigate that potential. Will adversaries ever stop trying to meddle in our system? No, it's not in the cards. It's what they do. Will Vladimir Putin ever just give it up and say, hey, let's all get along? No, it's not in his nature. So we have to accept the reality which we face rather than wish for something else. And part of that acceptance is going through and understanding what the threats are today that we must address. So do not be mistaken. Simply because your DREs, the digital systems which record votes, being air-gapped is an adequate defense regarding the potential threat. I spent an entire career at Defense Intelligence working to infiltrate and penetrate foreign adversaries' information systems, which they perceived as completely safe because it's not attached to the internet. Not being attached to the internet is not a defense. It does not stop people like me. And I've often said on Capitol Hill, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but in many ways very seriously, I'm the guy your mother told you to stay away from when you were a kid. Because that's what we do. Our job is to look at foreign systems and penetrate them. And there's people like me on the other side. And don't mistake that you all as a state would not be a top target by a foreign adversary. Remember, nation states have nearly unlimited resources to throw into a challenge. So the idea here that you all are safe because you're a state, you're not a federal system, that somehow these systems are not attached to the internet, that's not a defense. That's a target, a very juicy target for people like me sitting in Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, to come looking to knock on the door and get into. And would I care as an adversary what the outcome is if I'm able to interfere? No, because it benefits my country by creating chaos in your country. So not only is it a technology issue, it's a perception issue. The idea here is that you all are not only taking action to fix the system, to get rid of the DREs and replace them with hand ballots, with paper ballots that can be audited. Part of the effect of simply doing that inoculates you against foreign adversaries. So part of what you're doing today, what we're trying to do, is actually create the circumstance and perception that the system's going to become stronger. And remember, one of the things I've noticed and learned about terrorism over the years, terrorists are cowards. Terrorists tend to go to the lowest possible target, and we're talking about essentially a form of state terror inflicted on another state. So if Russia, if China sees that the state of Pennsylvania is doing something, they're probably going to go to another state and take another target which they perceive as less able to defend itself or less prepared. Now, I'm not saying that we should inflict this on Texas, but, you know, it's not Pennsylvania, right? So I'm asking you all to consider what needs to be done, what's necessary to establish the proper funding, the proper technology, and frankly, the proper perception to prevent an adversary from gaining any access to your system. It is simply not in the interest of the people of Pennsylvania or the people of America to have any swing state, especially Pennsylvania, the keystone state, a key state in the upcoming elections, to be perceived as weak, as vulnerable, or worse yet, a prime target because of known vulnerabilities within your system of voting. 2020 is going to be far too important to allow that. So I ask you all to support the idea of replacing the DREs as rapidly and efficiently as possible. The General Assembly must actually find the funding, and I've had a number of both official and unofficial conversations with the leaders here, and I know it's a tough issue. It's tough to find money, and I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm very close to Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan, and I'm not one who believes that the feds or the state should spend money. You know, I'm from Virginia, and I've always got problems with my state government there about what they're spending things on. But this is something that's important because of the issues I've outlined regarding threat, regarding the perception of threat, regarding what needs to be done to inoculate as best as possible and prevent if you're at all capable. So the governor has said he wants to fix it. Wonderful. But he has not actually followed those words with actions. $5 million. I'm sorry, it was $75 million over 5 years is insufficient, and the time frame doesn't match what we need. So I think the governor has done a disservice to the people of Pennsylvania. I'm not trying to be partisan here. I'm trying to be practical. The idea has to be, what does the safety of the people of Pennsylvania, what is the safety of their vote worth? What is that sacred right worth as we go into the next critical election cycles? I would argue it's worth a lot more than $75 million over 5 years. So we need to look at this from a bipartisan lens. This is something that both sides need to be concerned about. This is not about left or right. It's not about one side gaining advantage over the other. It's about the fact that since the beginning of our republic, we have had an adequate and effective system for managing votes, the individual votes, which they're tallied, correlated, and then presented as what we then used to change and continue our system of government. This is far too important to leave to random chance. So I'm very proud of the state of Pennsylvania. I spent a lot of time at the Army War College. I've worked with a number of representatives from the state. My good friend Kurt Weldon and I are very close, Kurt being from the Pennsylvania, the suburbs of Philadelphia. I am very proud of the work that I've done with Pennsylvania, with the members of Pennsylvania, with your legislature. But now is a time for those members, for the whole state of Pennsylvania to come together to demand that somehow, within the context of the upcoming budgets, that the money is adequately appropriated and provided to the state for purposes of actually securing the election for the future. So that's it. I hope everybody in the room today, both the members of the press, all work together on this. This is a common issue for all of us to understand. There's a threat. That threat is motivated. That threat will be motivated to upend any election, any results. They don't care. They have no particular interest in an outcome other than chaos. We need to prevent the chaos. We owe it to the people of Pennsylvania and America to secure the elections for purposes of sustainment of the Republic and going forward. So, again, thank you all for having me here this morning. I'm very proud to be here, and thank you for what you're doing.